In Los Angeles, a band of gunmen invade an armored car company. They grab millions and then vanish. When the FBI does find suspects, insufficient evidence prevents their arrest. Agents and detectives try to penetrate the gunmen's secretive world to bring them to justice.
An armed robbery is a terrifying ordeal. When a gang descended on a Los Angeles cash vault, they threatened to kill anyone who resisted. The violent assault was the largest heist in U.S. history, and a piece of plastic was the only evidence. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI, LAPD, and the IRS joined forces to unravel a complex network of money laundering, fraud, and a tight code of silence.
The Los Angeles warehouse district is a tough, bleak part of town. Street gangs and violence are common. The area's businesses are housed in nondescript buildings, many surrounded by barbed wire fences. One secure block was occupied by a leading armored car company. Friday night, September 13th, 1997. Employees of the armored car company were going about their routine, counting and sorting over $20 million. The money would be dispersed to automated teller machines across Los Angeles to meet the weekend demand for cash. There were 5 employees, including 2 security guards working the graveyard shift. At 12:30 a.m., one guard took his break in the lunchroom, as he did every night. But he wasn't alone.
Hands up, on the floor, now! We got one, we got security!
Five armed men subdued the guard in seconds.
Go! Let's go!
They dragged their hostage into an office where security monitors were kept. Then a second security guard, preparing to go home for the night, entered. Unarmed and out of uniform, he offered no resistance. Four of the assailants headed for the cash vault. The fifth held the guards at gunpoint and monitored the security cameras. The employees in the vault prep area were unaware that the building was under siege. The gunmen threatened to shoot if anyone disobeyed orders or made any sudden moves. The thieves now had direct access to the vault and its $20 million.
Get your head down! Get that head down! Number 3, stay on the work.
One man appeared to be in charge, barking orders to his accomplices.
No, don't touch that. This bin over here. This one right here. Number 5, everything's on schedule.
He also
Number 6,
used
get
a
ready to bring the
concealed
truck around.
radio headset to direct others somewhere outside the vault.
Over here, let's go.
When commanding his men, the leader didn't use names, only a numbered code. The robbers were coldly efficient, wasting no movement. In less than 10 minutes, they wheeled millions to the loading dock.
No, this one right here. Right here, right here. Right here, right here. Face down! Number 6, come on up, we're ready.
In the outer office, the gunman removed the surveillance recorder bolted to a desk. Seconds later, employees heard more destruction in the back office.
What's up?
When the leader and another man returned, the employees no doubt feared it was to eliminate witnesses. But the assailants only stole the vault manager's pickup truck keys. Suddenly, it was quiet. Believing the gunman had fled, the guards risked freeing themselves.
Hold up, Johnson. I'll help you out in a minute.
They called 911. LAPD officers were immediately dispatched to the scene.
Okay, hold on. We're going to go down there right now.
Detective John Licata knew the case was unusual from the beginning.
We have experienced armored car robberies where the couriers or the truck are attacked. Got a robbery homicide. But this was the first time we've ever had a facility hit.
Officers secured the crime scene, and detectives began interviewing the employees. They said the 5 assailants seemed to move through the facility as if they had been there before. They didn't see them leave, but they heard the sound of a diesel engine pulling into, then out of the loading area. A 6th assailant must have been driving. One employee thought she recognized the voice of one of the gunmen as that of a former armored car driver for the company. She agreed to come to the station in the morning to study a photo lineup of former employees.
What's your name, sir?
Detectives spoke with the vault manager whose personal pickup truck and keys had been stolen. They wondered why his keys were taken and not the others. The manager said he parked in the same spot each night.
Grab my keys and
None of the suspects had asked him what the vehicle looked like. That led us to believe that whoever took his keys and had taken his vehicle knew him and his vehicle.
The manager agreed one of the men's voices was familiar, but he couldn't think of a name.
went through my pockets and
He said he would contact them if it came to him. Forensic technicians took impressions of the facility's door locks. Initially, damage found on the doors and locks suggested the thieves used force to gain entry. But later examination by technicians in the police lab proved otherwise.
There was damage to the locks and the mechanisms, but not to the degree that it would have caused them to malfunction and to open.
They believed the gunman had used a key, then faked signs of forced entry. Company officials later estimated the loss at a staggering $18.9 million. the robbers knew what to take and what to leave behind.
All of the high cash bins, those bins that contained large amounts of cash, were taken. Those that didn't, that contained stamps and cash checks, were not taken.
This suggested that the assailants knew how the company stored its cash. The robbers also appeared to know where the company had installed its video surveillance recorders, including a backup machine that was hidden inside a locked cabinet in the back office. Employees had heard the assailants destroy the lock to get to the backup VCR.
The recording devices were kept in a cabinet, inaccessible to most employees. We interviewed all the facility employees, and 80% of them didn't know about the recording devices in the back office.
Investigators processed the loading area for any evidence of shoe prints, tire tracks, or clothing fibers. They found none. But they did discover what appeared to be a broken truck reflector or lens cover.
I personally spoke with the maintenance person that had cleaned the facility earlier in the day, and he assured me that that lens would have had to have been left there sometime in the evening. So it was surmised by us that it probably was left by the suspect's vehicle. We didn't have a lot of clues as to what the vehicle would be, other than that reflector that was recovered, and we didn't know if it was a common item taken off of trucks or vehicles.
Since the money stolen from the facility was federally insured, the FBI joined the investigation. Special Agent John McCarran from the Los Angeles field office studied a crime scene video made by the Los Angeles police that detailed the sequence of the gunman's activities during the robbery.
And put them in this room here. This door is unlocked. They laid both victims down on the floor here, and they also removed their keys. Once they did that,
The five masked gunmen had pulled off the largest cash heist in U.S. history.
guard these two.
Agent McCarran hoped the public could help find them.
The media was given general descriptions of the individuals that committed the robbery as far as height and weight and clothing, and the fact that the individuals were all armed, and there was a posting of a reward at the time.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Alka Sager hoped the vague descriptions would be enough to produce a lead.
The victims told us that they believed that the robbers were black, and that was based on the skin color that they saw through the eye holes of the mask. And they also told us that one of the robbers appeared to be lighter skinned and he may be Hispanic. They were not able to see anybody's face.
But they had heard voices. At LAPD headquarters, one of the armored car company employees was shown a photo lineup.
Look at some photos and see if we can finger this guy. Okay. Take your time.
The woman believed she had recognized the voice of one of the robbers.
Don't rush. Take your time.
Now she was trying to match his voice to a face.
But here.
The lineup consisted of pictures of policemen mixed with several former armored car drivers and security officers. She picked one former driver as a possible match to the voice she heard on the night of the robbery.
This guy?
Yes. Wore the glasses.
Police learned that the man had recently left LA for New Orleans. Agents from the FBI's New Orleans field office approached the former armored car driver at his family's home there.
Fine. I'm Agent Marks from the FBI. Is my partner. Is there a problem? No problem.
He said he was unaware that the company had been robbed and was willing to cooperate.
So why not? Come on in. Sure.
Sit down in here.
He said that he had left his job on good terms a few weeks before the robbery.
It turned out that he was out of town on vacation during the robbery, and the agents were able to corroborate his statements about being out of town.
Thank you very much.
On the night of the robbery in Los Angeles, the man was 1,900 miles away in Louisiana.
Gentlemen, have a nice day. Thanks a lot.
So he was ruled out as a suspect.
Despite the false lead, investigators still believed the robbery had been an inside job. But whoever the gunmen were, they left little behind. And with $18.9 million in their hands, they could be anywhere. In September 1997, the FBI and the LAPD were unable to identify any of the 6 masked men who had robbed an armored car company of nearly $19 million. They believed at least one was a current or former employee, since the gang entered the building with a key and knew where hidden surveillance equipment was.
You made mention at the scene.
In his second interview, the vault manager on duty during the heist realized he recognized the voice of the lead gunman.
Plus, he just got let go, too, so maybe he's
He believed the man was Alan Pace, a former company employee. He thought Pace was one of the 2 gunmen who stole the keys to his pickup truck. Pace was familiar with the truck and had asked to borrow it before.
He would be the one to know what type of truck I drive.
FBI Special Agent John McCarran studied Pace's employment history.
Alan Pace was an employee who had worked for the company for approximately a year and a half. He was actually suspended the day prior to the robbery.
28-year-old Alan Pace had no criminal record, but when the company suspended him for disciplinary reasons, he had not turned in his keys. Investigators went to interview Pace at his home in Los Angeles.
Alan Pace.
Pace told them he knew about the robbery through the media, but assured the agents that he had nothing to do with the heist. He said he was at a party with his girlfriend on the night of the crime. He gave them her address and phone number. Investigators needed to verify Pace's alibi. They called in for a background check on the girlfriend. Detective John Licata learned she was a former employee too.
Mr. Pace's girlfriend worked in the facility in the cash vault area and specifically had a position that required her to handle the security video equipment. She had been terminated approximately 4 weeks prior to the robbery.
Investigators asked Pace's girlfriend about the night of the robbery. She confirmed that on that night, Pace and several of his friends attended an all-night party in Long Beach. She and Pace stayed at the party through the early morning hours of the following day. And there were plenty of witnesses who saw them there. Though suspicious, Pace's alibi was corroborated, and it was enough to block investigators temporarily. They would need a different tack to keep the case moving forward.
Yeah, John Licata here. How you doing?
The only physical evidence was a cracked amber lens found at the crime scene.
We're going to
They believed it came from a diesel truck used as one of the getaway vehicles.
Okay. I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
They needed to find that truck.
I got the assistance of some of my partners and half a dozen of us for the next 5 evenings between the hours of 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. Went to the location of where the armored car facility was and interviewed anyone that frequented the area either on foot or in a vehicle.
A week after the robbery, they patrolled the warehouse district near the scene of the crime. After several nights, they found a homeless man who lived on the streets in the area.
A few questions. What's your name?
Henry.
Henry. Henry, is this where you stay?
He said that on the night the robbery took place, he saw a mid-size rental truck idling near the armored car company.
What kind of truck?
It sounded like a diesel.
Big white truck?
He noticed it that night because usually there was little business or late-night traffic in the area. But he didn't see the driver. He'd never seen the truck there before or since.
Take care of yourself, Henry.
All right, sir.
The description of the diesel rental truck fit the victim's statements that they heard a diesel truck in the company loading area. Investigators suspected that the amber lens found in the loading area had fallen off that truck. Teams of agents and detectives canvassed facilities in the Los Angeles area that rented diesel trucks. They showed employees a photo of the partial lens found at the crime scene. Several recognized the lens as the type used on the running lights for a certain model of truck. The lenses were a problem because they frequently fell off and needed to be replaced.
There were 83 rental truck facilities that rented the truck that the lens most likely came off of. We subpoenaed documents from all the rental vehicles that they had rented 2 months prior to the robbery, for a period of time 2 months after the robbery.
Investigators spent hours pouring through the rental records. But there were no rentals by Alan Pace or his girlfriend. It looked like another dead end. Authorities contacted Assistant U.S. Attorney Alka Sager for legal advice on how to proceed.
You can't just go get a warrant because somebody's a suspect and you think that they did a crime. You have to have evidence that they committed the crime. Alan Pace had denied any involvement in the robbery and had even claimed that he was at another place. He had an alibi, which witnesses that we spoke to corroborated. So at that point in time, all we had was the fact that he was a disgruntled employee who had been fired the day before the robbery, and one of the employees believed that one of the robbers had a voice that was similar to his. And that clearly was not enough evidence.
To find out more, the FBI and LAPD began watching the former armored car company employee. If Pace was involved in the multi-million-dollar robbery, he might show signs of his newfound wealth.
We did do surveillance of Mr. Pace, and he did not appear to be living beyond his means. He didn't appear to be spending a lot of money. He didn't appear to have a lot of cash at his disposal.
Nothing implicated Pace in the robbery beyond the circumstantial evidence they already had. As the months passed, there was little movement on the case. The reward for information leading to a conviction now totaled $250,000.
Despite the extensive media publicity this case received and the rewards for any information about the perpetrators of this robbery, there were absolutely no leads, no forensic evidence, no eyewitnesses. The investigation just came to a grinding halt.
Though Pace was still the primary suspect, without more substantial evidence, the FBI was unable to make an arrest. For now, it appeared that Alan Pace and 5 accomplices had gotten away with nearly $19 million in cash. By September of 1998, a full year had passed since 6 masked gunmen made off with almost $19 million. The prime suspect was Alan Pace, a former armored car company employee, suspended the day before the crime. Assistant U.S. Attorney Alka Sager was frustrated by the lack of evidence against Pace.
It didn't appear that he was out there spending money. It didn't appear that he had the fruits of the crime. So there really wasn't any legal basis to go out and arrest him or even to search his house.
Then, press coverage of the one-year anniversary of the crime prompted a lead for case agent John McCarran. An informant called the FBI, saying he thought he might know one of the robbers. Investigators went to the informant's home in suburban Los Angeles. The informant explained he had been an employee of the armored car company a year earlier, around the time of the robbery. He had since left to become a real estate agent. He claimed that shortly after the robbery, he was given $100,000 in cash to purchase a home for a man he knew, Eugene Hill. Hill asked that the deed to the home be listed in the name of his girlfriend. At his girlfriend's apartment, Hill stored a trunk filled with smaller boxes. He gave one of the boxes to the informant. It contained cash, still bundled by bank wrappers, totaling $100,000.
The informant, when he received the money, noticed that the $10,000 bundles had these bank straps on them. He kept those bank straps.
They were dated the 2 days prior to the heist.
We were able to later determine the paper type wrappers actually came from some of the money stolen from the armored car company.
The informant said Hill changed his mind and asked for the money back, but in cashier's checks, not cash. The informant had kept $15,000, and Hill had recently begun threatening him. He hoped the FBI could protect him. Eugene Hill had no criminal record and had never worked at the armored car company. But a background check revealed Hill had a connection with prime suspect Alan Pace. Both had worked for another security agency in Los Angeles. Investigators began surveillance on Hill. At one point, they followed him to a business named Extreme Entertainment. The company billed itself as an entertainment service that provided everything from children's games to exotic dancers. Business records revealed that Eugene Hill was a partner in the company, along with Alan Pace. Investigators suspected that Extreme Entertainment was likely established to launder money from the robbery.
The Internal Revenue Service was brought on board and supplied with information from records and documents which would assist us in preparing money laundering charges against some of these individuals.
The investigative team learned more about the company. Besides Alan Pace and Eugene Hill, Extreme Entertainment listed 2 other men as partners, Terry Brown and Fred McCrary. The 4 had worked together at the same LA security agency before Alan Pace was hired at the armored car company. Extreme Entertainment's accounting books looked suspicious to Los Angeles IRS Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Philip Mullins.
There were 4 suspected robbers involved in Extreme Entertainment. Extreme Entertainment wasn't really generating very much income, but there was a lot of cash going through the business, into the bank accounts, and then a lot of money being paid out in salaries.
Investigators began to dig deeper into the financial backgrounds of the 4 partners. They subpoenaed bank statements, credit card reports, and tax returns. In the personal bank records of Eugene Hill, they found the suspect had a second source of income.
One of the things that we discovered were deposits of checks from a company called Rainforest. Now, we'd never heard of Rainforest, and we didn't know what kind of company it was, so we went and looked at the Rainforest bank records. And we found that in addition to writing regular monthly checks to Eugene Hill, Rainforest was also writing checks on a regular basis to somebody named Thomas Johnson.
Like Hill, Thomas Johnson's position at Rainforest was listed as a consultant. It was unclear what type of consultants they were. Rainforest was in business developing new recycling technologies. Johnson and Hill had invested $2 million in the company. The investment in a legitimate company was a classic money laundering scheme.
You take bad money, you invest it in something, you hide it, conceal it, and ultimately end up with something that looks legitimate.
Investigators felt confident that the 5 men were strong suspects, but so far, no evidence connected them directly to the $18.9 million robbery. LAPD Detective John Licata and his partner, Detective John Wong, cross-referenced the suspects' names against truck rental records from the time of the robbery.
Sure, that'd be fine.
Detective Wong made an important discovery.
My partner, John Wong, is the one that found the rental agreement from one of the suspects, Eugene Hill, in which he had rented the suspect's vehicle that was used that night just prior to the robbery and then returned just after the robbery.
We were able to locate that very truck. It was still in the Los Angeles area. And we got that truck and we removed the light assembly and had the FBI forensics lab compare it to the lens that was found on the loading dock area.
They needed to know if the amber lens had fallen off that truck. While waiting for the lab results, investigators looked further into suspect Thomas Johnson. Johnson lived in an expensive home in an upscale Las Vegas neighborhood.
The IRS conducted surveillance of his residence, and during that period of time, his girlfriend at the time was identified.
Agents flagged the girlfriend's name. If Vegas police ran into her, they should call LA. On the night of September 10th, 1999, nearly 2 years to the day after the robbery, the team in LA got a call and boarded a helicopter. There had been a domestic disturbance at Thomas Johnson's Las Vegas home. Johnson's girlfriend had called the police. They hoped to use the disturbance call as an opportunity to question the girlfriend. She alleged that Johnson had beaten her. She was more than willing to answer any questions they had about him. She said Johnson was laundering money through the Las Vegas casinos. He and a friend would buy thousands of dollars in chips that he would later have her exchange for cash. The exchange was always in amounts less than $10,000 to avoid filling out cash reports.
Thomas Johnson appeared to be very fond of gambling and appeared to have a lot of money with which to gamble. And it's a little tricky when you do these types of investigations because you don't know where that money is coming from, if it's perhaps gambling winnings that are then being used to conduct more gambling activities, or if it's perhaps what we thought, which was money from the robbery.
The girlfriend told investigators Johnson had mentioned a big job that he had taken part in back in Los Angeles. She said Johnson had invested in a company with a gambling friend. When investigators showed her a photo of Eugene Hill, she confirmed that he was Johnson's friend. The circumstantial evidence against Thomas Johnson, Alan Pace, and Eugene Hill was building. But it was still not enough to make any arrests. Agents would need to turn the suspects against one another if there was to be any hope of convictions.
Hands up! On the floor now!
2 years after 6 masked gunmen robbed an armored car company of $18.9 million, the FBI, IRS, and LAPD had gathered strong circumstantial evidence against 5 suspects, but had nothing that directly tied the men to the crime.
30, 35, 40.
The only physical evidence recovered was a cracked amber lens found in the loading area of the armored car company. Investigators believe the lens fell off a truck rented by suspect Eugene Hill the day before the robbery. They sent the broken lens and the other lenses from the truck's running lights to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. Forensic metallurgist Michael Smith compared tool marks from the broken lens to those on the other lenses from the truck.
In this case, the marks look rather like the rings on a tree, and we attempt to see whether those marks line up or not.
Using a high-powered comparison microscope, he made an exact match. The same tool had made all the lenses in the same work session, indicating the broken lens had very likely come from the truck rented by Hill. The forensics results were compelling, but they did not definitively prove that Eugene Hill or the other 4 suspects were with the truck during the robbery. Assistant U.S. Attorney Alka Sager needed stronger evidence before authorizing arrests. She hoped Hill's girlfriends would provide it.
We had identified 2 of his girlfriends who also appeared to be spending not large amounts, but amounts of cash. Approximately 2 years after the robbery, we had gotten to the point where we needed to talk to these women that were in Eugene Hill's life.
We're gonna need your cooperation.
Worried that charges might be filed against her, one of Hill's girlfriends rolled, telling investigators what she knew. She told them that after the date of the robbery, Hill suddenly had a lot of cash. She said Hill stored 2 footlockers filled with boxes of the cash in her apartment. She and a friend helped him count and sort thousands. Hill told her that before the new crisp bills could be spent, they needed to look worn. So she washed them. Usually, Thomas Johnson took part in the operation. She said they would go to Las Vegas, buy gambling chips with the washed bills, and then turn them in for new cash. Her story corroborated the statement previously given by Johnson's girlfriend. In return for her testimony, prosecutors agreed not to file charges against her. Next, FBI agents and LAPD detectives wanted to talk to Eugene Hill's sister. They had some questions about bank accounts the IRS had uncovered.
We were able to subpoena her records and determine that she had several accounts that she was holding in trust for Eugene Hill. Those records showed that there were a lot of unexplained cash deposits into those records, and it also appeared that checks were being written for motorcycles and vehicles and other consumer goods. So now we had a little bit more indication that Eugene Hill was perhaps spending money that he really couldn't explain receiving.
She agreed to talk to the investigators, but said she first needed to make a phone call. She stepped away and appeared to send a numeric page. Investigators asked her about the accounts she held for her brother. She was evasive and claimed to be unaware of any of her brother's financial matters. Moments after the phone call, Eugene Hill arrived.
Mr. Hill, how are you tonight?
When questioned, Hill denied any knowledge of the armored car company robbery. He told investigators that he didn't have time to answer their questions then, but he would meet them the next morning at their office. Loaded with cash, Hill was a significant flight risk. The FBI called Assistant U.S. Attorney Alka Sager for advice.
I was just getting ready for bed. The phone rang at home, and the agent said, this is what Mr. Hill wants to do. Should we let him go? And it was just one of those split-second, decisions that had to be made. And I made the decision that we were not going to let Eugene Hill go. We were going to arrest him that night.
As Hill was heading back to his car, he was placed under arrest. With only circumstantial evidence connecting him to the robbery, it was a risk. The law requires an expeditious trial, and the clock had begun to tick. On September 23, 1999, the FBI arrested Eugene Hill, one of 5 men suspected in an armored car company heist. Assistant U.S. Attorney Alka Sager had made the decision to arrest Hill, despite having only circumstantial evidence linking him to the crime.
By letting Hill go, there was a real danger that he would have alerted the others to the investigation. Given the amount of money that was taken in this robbery, it was apparent that these robbers would have the means to flee if they wanted to. And I just felt we couldn't take that chance.
A search of Hill's home provided no solid evidence tying Hill to the robbery. But investigators did discover ledgers that showed Hill had purchased real estate in other people's names. Prime suspect Alan Pace was also listed on Hill's ledgers as having purchased real estate in others' names. Finally, IRS agent Philip Mullins had something on Pace.
This was very significant in that there was over $1 million worth of real estate purchased for Alan Pace, that he had no legitimate source of income to purchase that property.
If convicted, Eugene Hill was facing up to 40 years in prison. Hoping for sentencing consideration, he confessed and promised to tell police everything he knew.
Right, who's this Alan
He said Alan Pace recruited him and 3 others for the robbery.
Alan Pace told him that he had already spoken to Terry Brown and Freddie McCrary, and they were ready to do the job, and he wanted Eugene Hill to come on board and maybe bring another person in. So Eugene Hill approached Thomas Johnson, who agreed to participate, and that's where the plan was hatched.
Hill confirmed Pace was the mastermind of the heist and leader of the gang. Hill knew all of the men except for the 6th, who was a personal friend of Pace's. Pace told the others his plan could set them up for life.
5 to 6 employees at most.
Alan Pace told them that they would do the robbery on Friday night when there would be very few employees working there. He said that he knew who those employees were, that they wouldn't offer any resistance, and that it wouldn't be a problem. They would just tie up the employees, take the money, and they'd be in and out, within half an hour.
Following orders, Hill rented the diesel truck on the day of the robbery and met up with the gang at the party in Long Beach. Shortly before midnight, they left the party one by one. They drove to the warehouse district. Then 5 walked to the armored car company. During the robbery, 1 man stayed with the truck, waiting a few blocks away for the call to pull in. When the truck arrived, they loaded it up. Pace knew to take the surveillance equipment. They later transferred the money to a storage unit rented by Thomas Johnson, where it remained for 2 weeks. 4 of them left in the rental truck. Eugene Hill and Alan Pace drove away in the vault manager's pickup, since Pace knew where he parked each night. The 6 men disposed of the guns and VCRs, changed their clothes, and returned to the party as if nothing had happened. In the time it took others at the party to drink a couple more beers, the gang had committed the largest armed robbery in U.S. history. Investigators needed to corroborate Eugene Hill's story. FBI Special Agent John McCarran and his team believed Thomas Johnson should be the next one taken.
Agents in our Las Vegas field office were conducting surveillance on Thomas Johnson, and we knew his exact location. We followed him from one of the casinos.
Agents tailed Johnson as he visited several casinos. They did not know if the suspect was armed. To execute a safe arrest, agents needed to isolate Johnson outside and away from the casino crowd. They asked a casino security guard to approach him with a ruse. The guard told Johnson his car had been hit and that he needed to go outside to fill out a report. Johnson took the bait. As he checked his car, agents safely took him into custody. Investigators laid out the case against him and the possibility of decades in prison. Like Eugene Hill, Johnson cooperated in the hopes of a lighter sentence. Johnson verified Hill's version of the robbery and confirmed that Alan Pace was the leader. Investigators finally had sufficient evidence. They quickly arrested everyone but the leader.
We knew that Pace was aware of the earlier arrest of the other individuals. There was a warrant for his arrest, and he contacted me here at my office and told me that he wanted to self-surrender.
On February 28, 2000, Pace arrived at the LA Federal Building in the company of his lawyer. He made no statement and refused to cooperate with investigators. Pace was arrested and held without bail. 4 of the robbers pled guilty to robbery and conspiracy. Eugene Hill was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Thomas Johnson received 10 years. Fred McCrary received 7.5 years, and Terry Brown got 8. The 6th gunman, Eric Boyd, fought the charges against him and was found guilty and sentenced to 17 years. After a 3-week trial, Alan Pace, who had orchestrated the armed robbery, was sentenced to 24 years in prison. Agents seized all of the criminals' assets. They were able to account for about $5 million of the stolen money.
So about $14 million remains missing. We don't know where that money is, how it was spent, if it was spent. We just have no idea.
But whenever the felons are finally released, the FBI will be watching.
No one drops a dime. Okay.
If they make any moves to recover hidden money, they'll go straight back to jail. In Virginia, a bank robbery explodes in violence.
Put your hands up! Put your hands up!
Spraying bullets from automatic weapons at anyone in their way, the robbers disappear. With no reliable witnesses, the police and FBI have to decipher fragmented evidence to identify the shooters and then bring them to justice.
Despite what you see in the movies, most bank robbers come in quietly, pass a note, and slip away. They want cash, not bloodshed. But in Richmond, Virginia, a pair of gunmen entered a bank with their guns blazing. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The raw violence of the crime shocked even the most seasoned investigators, who vowed to catch them before they struck again.
Throughout the 1990s, Richmond, Virginia averaged about 10 bank robberies a year. Prior to 1997, not one of them was fatal. On the morning of January 30th, 1997, the employees of a small bank on the east end of the city began the day's business. 23-year-old Christine Edwards, one of the bank's tellers, arrived for work. Her colleague, 21-year-old Tracy Freeman, was already there. Allison Davis, a customer service representative, and Richard Hartman, the bank's security guard, also began their day. Stephen Reed, a regular customer, arrived shortly thereafter. He entered the bank as the tellers finished setting up and was greeted by Hartman.
Good morning, how may I help you, sir?
No one saw the two men slipping in the bank's rear door.
First National Bank, how may I help you? Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
When the men struck, they did so swiftly and without mercy. "80 yards away, Richmond police officers Michael Webb and Dave Martin were at a convenience store getting coffee for their morning shift.
Hey! Something's happening at the bank.
Where?
I heard gunshots at the bank.
The bank. About a block
the bank
down?
right up the street.
Excuse me, back up.
As the officers responded, Richmond Dispatch ordered backup units to the scene.
16 respond. 929, 116.
At the rear of the bank, the officers spotted a security guard lying in the parking lot.
The bank, man down. Looked like he'd been shot.
We're going to the front now.
Officer Martin guarded the front as Webb went to check on the guard. He was still alive. Barely. Webb called for an ambulance.
Volunteer EMT now.
Then, two armed men emerged from the bank.
Stop! 119-10-5 to 119W. Going all right.
Shots are being fired, units.
Webb emptied his clip. The officer knew he was pinned down and outgunned.
They stopped shooting, I stopped shooting, and I just knew these two guys were going to come each side of the vehicle after me. I changed magazines and sat there and waited for a couple of seconds.
But the gunman never came for him. Officer Martin left his position to back up Webb, but the assailants surprised him. With only a service weapon, Martin was outgunned, which allowed the robbers to get away from him. All the officer could do was report their position as they escaped across the cemetery.
Got a black male running with black jacket toward Divertown Road. 2 men.
The Richmond officer saw a cloud of red dye, the sign that the gunman had stolen a bundle of money containing a timed dye pack. The men leapt over the next wall, and the officer lost sight of them. The dispatcher forwarded the information to the Henrico County Police Department. Officer Martin searched the neighborhood, knowing 2 men with automatic weapons could be around any corner, but found no sign of the suspects.
.233 radio.
An Henrico patrolman arrived on the scene. EMTs arrived. They tended to the wounded guard outside. Richmond police entered the building.
Police, everybody down! Stay where you are!
Looking for any other gunman that might still be inside, and to check the condition of the other employees.
One teller down over here on the left.
They found 2 tellers, both shot.
It's okay. Come on out, man. Come on, everything's fine.
Allison Davis had taken cover.
Come with me. You okay? Everything's okay.
She was not injured, but paralyzed with fear and taken to the hospital for evaluation. After clearing the bank, the officers felt it was safe to let the EMTs care for the wounded. For teller Christine Edwards, it was too late.
One's gone.
Forensics responding. A squad and forensics responding. Deputies and supervisors for crime scene control.
Okay. Tell me where it hurts.
Tracy Freeman, in severe shock and bleeding heavily, was stabilized and rushed to the hospital.
All right.
Along with Richard Hartman, the security guard. At the Richmond Police Homicide Division, Detective Tom Leonard was disturbed by the robbers' brutality.
This was our most violent bank robbery that we can remember in our history. So our fear was they were in the neighborhood and we needed to get them off the streets.
Leonard headed to the bank. Officers collected items dropped by the robbers when they fled, including a Lorson 380 semi-automatic handgun and the clip to a Tech 9, another semi-automatic weapon. A K-9 officer with a tracking dog began searching for the suspects. The dog followed a scent through the cemetery. On Art Avenue, the dog lost the trail. Henrico and Richmond police canvassed the neighborhood, asking the residents if they had seen any strange men fleeing the area.
Rita?
But no one saw anything suspicious. Detective Leonard arrived at the crime scene with an evidence technician.
We immediately shut down that bank, and the only people that were inside the bank was myself and forensic people. So as we went through the bank looking for forensics evidence that we could pick up and look at, we found a lot of spent shell casings, which were fired. We had some that were unfired.
Those shells were 9mm, likely used in the Tech 9. Behind the teller's counter, investigators found a backpack, apparently left by the robbers. Inside was a piece of green tablecloth, a bottle of charcoal lighter fluid, a box of matches, and a note reading, "Please wait 5 minutes."
we couldn't figure out what that was all about.
On the surface of the teller's counter, investigators spotted several boot prints. They preserved each print with tape, which they would later compare with footwear collected from potential suspects. Because the bank was federally insured, police called in FBI Special Agent Wayne Waddell from the Richmond field office.
Let's go ahead and see what we can get on this, Tom.
At the bank, he and Detective Leonard checked a videotape that had recorded several surveillance cameras simultaneously. But there was a problem.
Oh man, Tom, look at that. We got a problem.
Something caused the film, in our opinion, to not be working correctly. It went one camera to another camera to another camera, and you were getting different angles from the front door, the rear door, and from different teller positions.
They would need to make still photos from the individual frames to get any useful details. Special Agent Eduardo Alford joined the investigation. He knew the FBI would not stop until the gunmen were captured.
I'm sure if you talk to every person that was involved in this investigation, they would tell you the same thing. They wanted to stay on this case around the clock, which essentially is what happened.
Evidence collection at the bank lasted for hours.
Later on in the evening, at around 5:30 or 6, we received word that Henrico County had received a report of a break-in. I went over to the break-in site.
It was on Art Avenue, across from the cemetery, not far from where the K-9 unit had lost the trail of the suspects.
We didn't know if it had anything to do with the bank robbery or not. A young woman that lived there with her father found the front door had been knocked open and went in the house and discovered a lot of items that appeared knocked around or perhaps taken.
When Special Agent Waddell went inside, a Henrico officer pointed out a hole in the ceiling. It appeared someone had stepped through from above. They feared someone might be hiding in the attic. No one was there. They searched for evidence. Investigators found a pair of boots. They also found a backpack and a coat. Inside was another note reading, "Please wait 5 minutes." They also found another green tablecloth. Red dye, like that used in bank dye packs, covered many of the items.
So we absolutely felt that there was a connection between the house break-in and the bank robbery.
But they didn't know how the two crimes were related.
We had no idea why the bank robbers would come to that house. Was it an opportune moment? Did they know someone there? Was there something that drew them there? Was it happenstance? We had no idea. We interviewed the owner and his daughter and the daughter's boyfriend. And you interview these people because what are these bank robbers, what are these suspects doing in your house? And we're trying to find, is there a link or is there not a link?
The residents were equally confused. They reported that whoever broke into the house stole some men's clothing, suits and jackets. During questioning, the boyfriend acted nervous and claimed he had no information to add.
About what time did you get here?
At the hospital, A Richmond detective sought out the wounded victims who could provide eyewitness accounts.
Yes, ma'am.
But he was unable to see anyone. The 2 wounded survivors were still in surgery and could not be interviewed. Allison Davis, the customer representative who had escaped injury under her desk, was so distraught she had to be heavily sedated. Stephen Reed, the customer inside the bank, had been grazed by a bullet and had come to the emergency room on his own. But he was also of no help. He had Alzheimer's disease and could not remember any useful information.
By the end of that first day, we still had nothing more than what we had to begin with. So we knew it was going to be a ways to go. It was going to be a tough case.
In Richmond, Virginia, 2 armed bank robbers escaped with $10,000 cash, leaving 2 employees wounded, and 23-year-old teller Christine Edwards dead. The community was stunned, as was Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Altamari.
This girl was an angel. And these guys, they just walked into the bank without a word spoken and shot her dead. It's sick.
Determined to find her killers, Richmond homicide detective Tom Leonard and FBI Special Agent Wayne Waddell had to pursue the case without the benefit of eyewitness accounts.
The problem with the employees and the customer that were in the bank is they were all traumatized. We actually could not talk to any of them for several days.
The detective tried to interview Allison Davis, the customer representative who had taken cover under her desk and escaped injury. But she was too traumatized by the ordeal.
Yes, I'm Detective.
Hospital staff had to sedate her, and she was unable to speak.
All means 30 seconds.
There were no witnesses available to tell investigators what actually happened inside the bank. All they had to understand those events was a flawed videotape of the surveillance cameras, according to Detective Tom Leonard.
That really caused us a problem trying to piece things together because we were missing little bits and pieces of the video, so you didn't get to see the whole robbery occur like you normally would.
Working with still photos captured from the surveillance video and records of the physical evidence recovered from the bank, the investigators pieced the crime together moment by moment. It was a complex series of events, all taking place in a matter of seconds.
You could see where the bank had obviously opened, but the only people who were inside were the security guard, the bank representatives, and one customer. The customer was standing there at the walkway area where you go through your little lines, talking to the security guard.
The lead gunman headed straight for the teller's counter.
The first guy bypassed the security guard without even looking at him, without even noticing him. In our minds, we realized the front guy was not worried about the security guard. He knew that the second guy was going to take him out.
In the photos, investigators saw the second robber pointing the Tech 9 at the guard. The first robber reached the counter and shot both tellers, killing one.
Rack that weapon, and he walks all the way down here.
Ballistics testing showed both were shot with the Lorsen 380 recovered outside the bank.
Here, going over the counter.
A bullet hole behind the customer representative's desk showed the gunman turned and fired at her, but the shot missed. Investigators noted the unfired 9mm rounds found on the floor. This suggested the Tech 9 had likely jammed and the gunman ejected rounds trying to clear it.
I think when she was...
The photos revealed there was a brief standoff. While the second robber tried to clear his Tech 9, the first attempted to shoot the guard with a Lorsen. But that gun malfunctioned too. The Lorsen 380, recovered outside the bank, was found with a jammed cartridge. When the guns jammed, the customer, Stephen Reed, fled, followed by Richard Hartman, the guard. Unable to clear the Lorsen, the lead gunman pulled an AR-15 assault rifle and followed them. Spent shell casings and bullet strikes found outside supported witness statements as to what had happened next in the bank's drive-thru. One witness saw a gunman chasing the fleeing customer. He grazed his arm. The guard tried his best to stop the killer, but was struck by multiple rounds. The gunman returned inside. Hartman was still alive. The witness watched as he entered the rear of the bank.
He pulls open that back door, the wooden door, right?
Investigators realized Hartman had risked his life trying to draw the robbers out. The robbers loaded a backpack with money, including one bundle that contained a dye pack. The guard approached, fired, but missed. Another witness saw the guard flee the rear of the bank. The lead gunman pursued him into the parking lot and fired. The final shot to the temple permanently blinded Richard Hartman. Moments later, officers Webb and Martin found him there. Agent Waddell and Detective Leonard now had a clear account of the crime. Since the robbers came into the bank shooting, investigators believed their intent was to murder everyone, to eliminate all witnesses at the bank. The contents of the robbers' backpack revealed a plan to minimize witnesses on the outside.
The tablecloths and the note were, I think, to be put over the doors to ward off anyone coming up to the bank. Give us 5 minutes, we're still cleaning. Give us 5 minutes, we're not ready to open up yet. Something like that.
With the bank to themselves, the robbers could take their time. The piece of evidence that disturbed investigators the most was the lighter fluid. They believed the robbers were planning to use it to set the bank on fire as they left. Investigators knew they were dealing with especially violent criminals who acted with no remorse.
We needed to get them off the streets. Our fear was these people were going to get out into the community and commit some more murders because they'd already been bold enough to come into the bank and start shooting people. And we'd have to gunfight with these people to try to catch them later.
And the criminals were well armed. They still had an AR-15, the civilian version of the military's assault rifle, and a Tech-9, a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. The one weapon recovered, the murder weapon, was a Lorson 380 semi-automatic. A records check revealed it had been stolen weeks earlier. Investigators released details of the guns to the press and asked for the public's help in tracking down the weapons. It worked, according to Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Altamari.
We got lucky. We got very lucky. There was a person who was out there that overheard a woman that she worked with say that she thought that her husband sold those weapons. The FBI and the Richmond PD followed up on that lead and in fact did locate a gentleman who was a legitimate and licensed gun dealer.
At first, the dealer was reluctant to talk to authorities. He didn't want to incriminate himself by admitting that he might have sold weapons used in a murder. After agents assured him he could not be held liable since the guns were sold legally, he admitted he had sold a Tech-9 and an AR-15 a few days before the robbery.
Yeah, I got it all right here.
He located the ATF forms filled out by the purchaser. Investigators now had a name to move on.
The gun dealer told us that he had sold the weapons to Jermaine Sims. And we got hold of all of the units, all the guys working the case. Everybody was out trying to locate him. They finally ascertained that Sims was out of town.
While the search for Sims continued, investigators kept following their only other promising lead, the Art Avenue house that the robbers had broken into.
We started checking everything we could find out about the owner and his family. The girl that lived there had a boyfriend. We started checking him out. So we started from scratch with just basically an investigation on every person in the house.
The boyfriend, who had acted nervous during interviews, consented to a polygraph test. The polygraph examiner asked questions about the robbery and murder, while Special Agent Waddell observed. After an hour of questioning, the polygraph results were inconclusive.
Did you rob that bank?
The boyfriend could not be eliminated as a suspect. Special Agent Waddell knew he needed to re-examine the house and went back with a search warrant. This time, he returned with an FBI evidence response team. He was determined that a more thorough search would reveal a connection between the bank robbery and the break-in. The ERT technicians scoured the attic.
Got 2 guns here, 2.
Behind a wallboard, they found a Tech-9 semi-automatic pistol and an AR-15 assault rifle, precisely the type of guns used in the crime. They were still loaded, and their serial numbers were intact. Special Agent Waddell proceeded to check if these were the same guns purchased by Jermaine Sims.
We wanted to verify that they were in fact the weapons that had been bought from the gun dealer and used in the bank robbery. So we called back to the office. We read off the serial number, make, and model of these weapons, and they were compared to the ATF firearms form.
They were the same weapons. A ballistics expert compared slugs recovered from the bank to slugs fired from the recovered AR-15. They matched, connecting that weapon to the fatal bank robbery. It seemed certain that Jermaine Sims had indeed bought the weapons used in the robbery and murder. Now, the FBI and Richmond police needed to find him. In Richmond, federal agents determined 2 weapons used in a deadly bank robbery were purchased by a man named Jermaine Sims. Agents could not find Sims, but a background check revealed he was receiving government assistance. They followed up on that lead. At the Social Services office, an administrator confirmed that Sims regularly came in to pick up food stamps. She flagged his name on their computers and agreed to page the FBI the next time the suspect showed up.
First name. Yes. Afternoon, ma'am. This is Special Agent Corson.
Agents went to the address listed on the ATF form and spoke to Sims' mother. She hadn't seen her son since she kicked him out the previous week. Days later, Richmond agents received a page from the Social Services Agency. Sims was there.
It's just a matter of pulling your check up.
The administrator stalled Sims until the agents arrived. They hoped he didn't suspect anything. When the agents arrived, the suspect seemed calm.
Excuse me, sir. Special Agents FBI. I need you to come with me.
They asked Sims to come in for questioning. Reluctantly, he agreed.
Clear. Go ahead and thank her for me.
They took him to a nearby police station where investigators tried to get him to talk about the guns. But interviewing the suspect was no easy task, according to Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Altamari.
Sims was a difficult person to deal with. He was a person who was filled with hate and hostility. He didn't want to be there. He didn't want to certainly cooperate with us. We were dragging bits and bits of information out of him, and he was really only providing us information that we already knew. We were having a lot of trouble bringing him to the table, so to speak.
Sims denied any involvement in the crime, stating he was at his girlfriend's apartment at the time of the robbery.
Who lives there with him?
Over several hours, Altamari kept pressuring him until finally Sims admitted he had bought the AR-15 and the Tech-9 with the intent to sell them later for a profit. He said he stashed the weapons at a friend's house, a man named Ra, but claimed he couldn't remember the address.
A street called Main Street.
Instead, he gave directions.
Now, who else is this guy Ra?
The interview continued while Special Agent Wayne Waddell tried to confirm Sims' story.
Sims told us where this house was located and described the house to us. We went to the locations. We could not find the house.
Determined, Altamari confronted Sims with his deception.
Do you think you're dealing with a bunch of amateurs here?
But Sims maintained his story that he still knew nothing about the bank robbery.
You've already told me that.
By then, authorities had located Sims' girlfriend, who supported his alibi. But investigators had strong evidence connecting him to the crime.
You're going to jail for the rest of your life.
He was informed that he was under arrest for bank robbery.
There's nothing like the silence of a jail cell to focus somebody on their problem. And he had a huge problem. He had his name on the title to these weapons that were used in this robbery. And we thought that if we gave him a little time to think for himself, that he would eventually come to the conclusion that it was in his best interest to cooperate with us.
After a week of incarceration and repeated interviews, Sims decided to talk.
Now, tell me about the guns.
He said after he bought the guns, he left them with two friends, Rashid Jones and LaFawn Bobbitt. He still denied having any involvement in the robbery, but investigators continued to work on him.
He admitted that, that of course he knew that they had robbed the bank. He still claimed that he was surprised that they had used his guns to do it, and expressed his outrage that they would have done this to him and gotten him involved.
Sims said that after the robbery, Bobbitt and Jones came to his apartment wearing clothes he had never seen them in before. They told him about the botched robbery, the gunfight, and their escape. They explained that they had broken into the house on Art Avenue, choosing it at random. They stole some clothes and stashed their guns behind the wallboard in the attic. As they were leaving, Jones accidentally stepped through the ceiling. They then slipped out, avoiding the patrolling officers. They had the money with them, but it was stained red from the dye pack. Police records revealed that LaFawn Bobbitt had 11 prior convictions and was free on bond from charges related to grand theft auto. Rashid Jones had 7 prior convictions, including grand larceny, and was on parole. Investigators reduced the charge against Sims from bank robbery to conspiracy. Now, with the identity of the killers in hand, the real chase could begin. After a 1997 bank heist that left one teller dead, Richmond, Virginia authorities believed they had identified the gunmen as LaFawn Bobbitt and Rashid Jones. They had no idea where to look for Jones, but they did set up surveillance at Bobbitt's last known address.
Been in it for a while. Yeah.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Ken Melson was determined to apprehend these men as quickly as possible.
We had to get these 2 cold-blooded killers off the street as soon as we can, so we would eliminate the possibility that they could do the same thing again and someone else would get killed. And yet we had a lot of work to do collecting the physical evidence, getting it analyzed by the lab.
They needed more time to build the federal case, but could not afford to have 2 killers on the loose.
Prosecutor's office in Henrico County to charge Bobbitt with the burglary, the breaking and entering of the Art Avenue address. With respect to Jones, he was in violation of his parole, so we got a warrant for a parole violation.
Special Agent Wayne Waddell received the go-ahead to bring in the fugitives on those charges.
We had 2 agents watching LaFawn Bobbitt's house. The 2 agents were Paul Messing and Eddie Alford. And we finally get authorization to arrest LaFawn Bobbitt. I get hold of Messing and Alford. They tell me that Bobbitt has just left his house.
All right, thank you. The agent told the surveillance team to follow Bobbitt, then headed off to back them up. The agents followed the suspect into town, where he boarded a bus. They kept in contact with Special Agent Waddell, updating him on their location.
302,
Soon, Waddell caught up. They decided to arrest Bobbitt at the next bus stop.
Bus is right in front of me. All right, 10-4, I'm getting ready to come around you right now.
Waddell pulled around front to get into position. The other agents pulled in behind. When the bus stopped, the agents were ready.
Come on, Bob, if you're under arrest for parole violation, put your hands up.
Within moments, suspect LaFawn Bobbitt was in custody. Investigators executed a search warrant on Bobbitt's home. In his bedroom, they discovered a manual for a .380 Lorson pistol, the same model used in the murder. They also found several spent .380 shells. For FBI Special Agent Eduardo Alford, this circumstantial evidence suggested it was Bobbitt who fired the fatal shot.
It was actually the weapon that one of the tellers was killed with. Finding that shell casing was very helpful as far as determining which one of the subjects or suspects might have had possession of this weapon on this particular day.
The FBI lab identified Bobbitt's fingerprints on items left at the bank by the robbers, the first evidence directly linking him to the crime. Technicians at the FBI's Question Documents Unit compared the boot impressions found at the bank with boots recovered from the Art Avenue house and from Bobbitt's home.
One of the latent footwear impressions was consistent with a boot that was left at the Art Avenue address. Another latent was found to be consistent with a boot found at Bobbitt's house at a later search. And so that circumstantially, again, not conclusively, but circumstantially placed Bobbitt and his apparel in that bank.
The boots found in the attic likely belonged to Bobbitt's alleged partner in the crime, Rashid Jones. Federal prosecutors now charged LaFawn Bobbitt with the bank robbery and murder, but investigators still needed to find Rashid Jones. 3 months after the crime, authorities received a tip from a store clerk. He reported a customer had attempted to pay with dye-stained bills. The clerk refused to accept them.
Mr. Jones had been in that particular area in the south end of Richmond trying to exchange some of this money. So the Fugitive Task Force pieced that information together, and they were really able to hone in on that particular area based on the proximity of this particular merchant's store.
The FBI focused on that neighborhood, working all of their contacts. The effort paid off.
The information that came in was from just a reliable source of information. Somebody that was aware of this crime and knew Mr. Jones and was able to pinpoint a location of where he was hiding.
Jones was staying in a run-down apartment building frequented by transients. Agents were able to obtain the cooperation of a man living there. The arrest was planned for 5 a.m. when Jones would likely be asleep. They called the location and spoke to their contact inside. He said Jones was there, sleeping, and he had a gun. Their contact also warned there were other people in the apartment, and most of the lights did not work. As the arrest team approached the building, they went through a final briefing, reviewing photos of their target. They anticipated a dangerous confrontation. Jones was armed, desperate, and surrounded by innocent bystanders. In 1997, the Richmond Fugitive Task Force SWAT unit closed in on Rashid Jones, suspected of bank robbery and murder. They'd received a tip that Jones was hiding out in an apartment. From their contact inside, they learned Jones was armed and most of the lights did not work. There were several innocent people in the apartment. The building was dark and foreign, complicating an already difficult challenge in which SWAT had to take down an armed fugitive while protecting innocent bystanders. The team decided to sneak up on Jones silently. They hoped he had not been tipped off. When they reached the target apartment, an agent phoned their contact inside.
FBI, we're here.
The contact was escorted out of the building. When they made it to the room where Jones was said to be sleeping, he was gone. So was his gun. Tension mounted as SWAT began searching the rest of the apartment.
Get your hands up, man. Get your hands up. Come on, get up. Get up.
They found and removed 2 other residents. Every room was cleared, except one, a bathroom.
Jones, we know you're in there. Come out. Put your hands up, Jones. That's him. Let's go.
To the team's relief, Jones was unarmed and surrendered without a fight. The manhunt was over.
Get on, sit up.
Agents searched for his weapon. They discovered it in a closet, its firing pin broken. Had the gun been functional, the arrest might not have gone so smoothly. Jones was immediately charged with probation violation and later for the bank robbery. On February 25, 1998, the trial of Rasheed Jones and LaFawn Bobbitt began. But it would not be an easy case. Assistant U.S. Attorney Ken Melson and his prosecution team were unable to use any of the people in the bank as witnesses.
None of them could really testify for us because the guard was blind as a result of being wounded. One teller was dead. Another one had never had the opportunity to even turn around to see anything. And a third employee was unable to testify because she didn't see anything. She was under a desk during most of the robbery.
Melson found a way to deal with the lack of witnesses by commissioning a digital recreation of the crime.
We had to stand in for them digitally and show the jury what happened inside that bank. We were the witnesses' voice to the jury during the trial so that they could be involved and experience the agony of the victims, experience the moment of the bank robbery. And that would give them not only the true feeling of what went on in the bank, but the true carnage and intent of the defendants.
After hearing 6 days of testimony, the jury convicted both gunmen on all charges. Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Altamari.
In the trial, they sat there smug as all get out. And it wasn't until after they were convicted that you could really see them start to worry, because then it was about them. Then they were worried.
Bobbitt and Jones were each sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jermaine Sims, who purchased 2 of the weapons used in the robbery, was convicted on conspiracy, accessory before the fact of murder, and several weapons violations. He, too, was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. As the victims and their families continue to heal, they and the city of Richmond know that Jones, Bobbitt, and Sims will never be a threat to anyone again. A series of bombings rock cities from New York to Miami. Embassies are attacked. Businesses are destroyed. Cuban Americans are gunned down by assassins. Deep within the U.S.-Cuban exile community, a mysterious group emerges to take credit for the violence. A terrorist group known as Omega 7.
In the late 1970s, the FBI had a working knowledge of anti-Castro terrorists operating in the United States. But then a new group appeared, more violent and aggressive than their predecessors. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. All agents had to go on was a series of chilling phone calls, a mysterious voice, and the threat of more violence. FBI field officers from New York to Miami coordinated their efforts, determined to catch the vicious killers.
New York City, the morning of June 6, 1976, uptown Manhattan. A massive bomb detonates at the Cuban mission to the United Nations. New York police and the FBI rush to investigate the explosion.
I could actually hear the bombs go off from my apartment.
Special Agent Larry Wack lives 3 blocks from the mission. He's on the scene in minutes.
The devastation was unbelievable. My first reaction was, there's no way anybody walked away from this thing. And it turned out nobody got injured or hurt.
Special Agent Wack examines the entrance of the mission. From the blast pattern, it looks like the bomb exploded directly in front of the door. He notices a security camera mounted overhead.
Assuming that the guy walks up and sets it down at the door, he had to be on video.
Agent Wack asks a Cuban diplomat for permission to look at the videotape.
Videotape from your camera?
Told us that we couldn't view it right away and that they would take a look at it and get back to me. Got a call the next day from one of the diplomatic personnel up there who said that there's nothing on the tape. And I said, oh, okay. This is the game we're going to play.
It appears that the Cuban officials are keeping the videotaped evidence for their own intelligence, even if it cripples an FBI investigation.
It would be nice in a perfect world if they said, look, here's a copy of the tape and you do what you need to do with it. And, you know, we're going to keep the original, but it doesn't happen.
A news station provides the FBI with a tape-recorded phone call from a man who claims he belongs to an anti-Castro organization that bombed the Cuban mission, Omega 7.
We are Omega 7. Thank you.
The FBI has never heard of Omega 7. For Cubans fleeing Fidel Castro's brutal regime, northern New Jersey has become a safe haven. It is home to nearly 100,000 Cuban immigrants.
We're trying to get information.
FBI agents talk with people in the community in an effort to identify members of Omega 7.
Getting information from the Cuban exile community was one of the most difficult things we ever ran across. Even if they knew who the guys were, to them they're heroes.
For the FBI, it's another dead end. Over the next 2 years, Omega 7 strikes targets in New York City again and again. They bomb the Cuban mission twice. Another bomb detonates at Lincoln Center, where an orchestra from Cuba had been performing. In each instance, a representative of Omega 7 calls local news stations to claim responsibility. The terrorist group is on a rampage, but the FBI has few leads.
We were coming up with no witnesses. We were coming up with pieces of battery and whatever that wasn't going to pin down anybody.
For now, investigators' only solid lead is a mysterious voice claiming responsibility for the violence. To FBI Special Agent Tom Menapace, all the tapes sound like the same person.
There were slight variations in tone, but if you listen to them all at the same time, you really picked up kind of a common thread.
The caller would identify himself always as a member of Omega 7.
Most people pronounced it Omega. There was a distinct Omega with this guy. It was calm, collected. Here's what we did, here's why we did it.
FBI agents in New York and Miami have interviewed dozens of suspected anti-Castro terrorists. But none of the agents recognize this particular voice.
The voice was driving us crazy. Nobody's got this voice. We were taking copies of the tapes and playing them with prominent members of the community. And we were basically trying to get a name for that caller.
But even those deeply involved in the Cuban community are unable to ID the caller.
If there's not that immediate recognition, then a lot of times you get into an area where people are speculating. It's like, gee, it sounds like so-and-so, and you kind of know right there that, you know, they're stretching.
Yeah, they're locals. Thanks very much for your help.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Investigators also play the voice for informants they know have connections to various anti-Castro organizations. No one has any idea who the voice belongs to.
Don't recognize anyone.
And still, the bombings continue. Northern New Jersey, March 1979. Omega-7 bombs the offices of a Cuban businessman in northern New Jersey. His name is Eulalio Negrin, an activist who helps reunite Cuban refugees with their families in the United States. At the scene, the FBI finds no witnesses and little evidence. Investigators believe the bomb is only a warning.
If they meant to kill Negrin with a bomb, I would think that they would have used a more powerful device and known that he was there or put it on his car or something like that.
That fall, more than 3 years after the original Omega-7 attack, another bomb explodes at the Cuban mission to the UN. The same mysterious voice calls news stations and takes credit on behalf of Omega-7. A month later, the terrorist group abruptly changes its pattern. Eulalio Negrin and his 12-year-old son leave their home. In New Jersey, 2 masked men attack a businessman for trying to free political prisoners in Cuba. The victim is Eulalio Negrin, a Cuban-American activist. Paramedics try to save his life, but he's lost a lot of blood. In the end, Negrin pays the ultimate price. Tragically, Negrin's 12-year-old son witnessed his father's horrible killing. FBI Special Agent Tom Menapace must interview the grief-stricken boy.
He was in shock. Basically saw his father get killed. And that's pretty horrible.
Special Agent Larry Wack is stunned by the brutality of the murder.
There's a lot of unwritten rules out there in the game of cops and robbers and bad guys. Shooting a man in front of his son is not part of the rules. And I found that to be tremendously cold and calculating, and began to realize that we were dealing with some pretty callous fellas.
Union City Police recover empty brass cartridges believed to be from the shooter's weapon. The FBI and police question area residents.
Could you tell how many people were inside?
You do a real intense neighborhood investigation, essentially tracing the path in which the car was seen fleeing.
Investigators finally find a witness who can describe the color, make, and model of the gunman's vehicle. At the Newark FBI office, Special Agent Menapace listens to a news tape in which a voice proudly claims credit for Negrin's murder.
The stakes are getting higher. It's gone from being, a bomb in a doorway, endangering people, to actually taking a life.
A prominent man has been assassinated in front of his own home. But all Agent Menapace has to go on is a vague description of the killer's car.
How many of them are registered in Union City or Hudson County or Elizabeth? Who are they registered to? Are any of those registrations people who we have as suspects in the case?
In 1979, there was no computerized record system for vehicles by make and model. Investigators failed to find the killer's car. At the autopsy, a pathologist recovers several bullets from the murdered man's body. The bullets could be crucial evidence, but only if investigators can find the murder weapon. A month later, December 1979, the Cuban mission is bombed again. The Soviet mission is also attacked for providing aid to Cuba. The blast seriously injures an NYPD officer. Yet again, the mysterious voice of Omega-7 takes credit for both bombings. Miami, January 1980. A bomb partially destroys a small cigar factory.
Now, how long?
This is the third bombing in Miami in a year.
3 years now?
To the FBI, the pattern is familiar.
How about your local?
Special Agent George Kaczynski is a bomb tech with the FBI's Miami field office.
Some of them I know.
There was a tremendous amount of damage done, not just to the building, but to the cigars that were being manufactured there, which are manufactured by hand.
As in New York, a representative of Omega-7 calls a local news station to take credit for the bombings. FBI Special Agent Tom Walzer believes the terrorists are trying to intimidate the shop owner, who advocates better relations with Cuba.
The goal was ultimately to get to the attention of the Cuban community, but it was also to send a message to the individuals and businesses that had dialogue with the Castro regime, as well as to send a message to the island of Cuba itself.
In Little Havana, a predominantly Cuban neighborhood in Miami, FBI agents and police continue to dig for clues.
We have good access to Cuban leaders, to individuals in the community, as well as established sources that cooperate with the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, because the Miami PD has informants, Metro-Dade has them, FDLE has them, ATF has them.
Despite their wealth of informants, the FBI comes up with nothing solid. Agents compare tape recordings of the Miami bombings with those from New York. They agree that it's the same person. As in New York, investigators play a tape for members of Miami's Cuban community. No one seems to recognize it. Manhattan, March 25th, 1980. FBI agents respond to a report that a bomb has been placed on a limousine belonging to the Cuban ambassador to the United Nations. Through interviews, investigators piece together what happened. When the chauffeur got the limo ready to take the ambassador to an appointment, he bumped the car in front of him. He got out to inspect the damage and found a shoebox wrapped in gray duct tape. The chauffeur was suspicious. He was aware that the mission had been bombed repeatedly. He put the box in a garbage can away from the mission and hurried inside to call police. When the NYPD bomb squad arrives, The chauffeur shows them where he put the suspicious device. But the garbage can is now empty. The officers realize the Department of Sanitation has made its regularly scheduled pickup. By now, the truck and the bomb could be anywhere in the city. In New York, a chauffeur finds a possible bomb underneath the limousine of the Cuban ambassador to the United Nations. He places the suspicious device in a trash can and calls the NYPD bomb squad. By the time they arrive, the device has been picked up by a city garbage truck. The bomb squad catches up to the truck. They question the driver, according to FBI Special Agent Tom Menapace.
When they first ask him, you know, did you find something, a mechanical device in the trash? He says no. They're like, it might be a bomb, at which point he's like, it's in the cab.
The driver had spotted a radio receiver inside the box. He was planning to take it home. Inside the box is enough C4 explosive to potentially blow up a building. In the lab, an FBI bomb expert examines the device for fingerprints, hairs, and fibers. He finds nothing. Queens, New York, September 11th, 1980. Omega-7 claims another life. The victim is an attaché of the Cuban mission to the United Nations.
To my knowledge, it was the first assassination of a UN official in the history of the UN on US soil.
A newly formed FBI NYPD task force investigates. It's the first joint terrorism task force in FBI history. In the fall of 1980, the FBI gets a break in the case. A former anti-Castro radical contacts Special Agent Larry Wack. He feels innocent people are dying and decides to cooperate. The informant cannot identify the members of Omega-7, but he has heard a rumor about the group.
He had learned that there had been a significant split in the actual Omega hierarchy, or as he called it, the board.
Anything else?
Agent Wack believes that once the FBI has identified suspects, they can exploit the division by pitting one faction against the other. 3 months after the murder of the Cuban attaché, a bomb explodes in front of the Cuban consulate in Montreal. At the New York FBI office, the task force wonders if Omega-7 members from the United States are responsible. According to the INS, shortly after the bomb exploded, a car entering the United States refused to stop for inspection. Border guards were unable to get the license plate number. The car was going too fast. But they did get a description of the vehicle. A short time later, a New York state trooper stopped a car matching that description. The two men inside the car denied running the border.
A few miles back. Is that you guys? No, sir. We haven't run the border.
Without a license plate number or other evidence of guilt, the officer was forced to let them go. But before he did, he wrote down the information from their driver's licenses, including their names, Enrique Erbons and Antonio Casaveres. The task force recognizes Erbons' name.
He was known to us as a fanatical, violent exile from Miami. The other gentleman in the car was an unknown entity at that moment, which was interesting to us because the big question was, who is this guy?
According to his driver's license, Casaveres lives in New Jersey. Agent Menapace visits his apartment complex to talk to his neighbors. They tell him Casaveris recently moved to Miami. Menapace plays a tape of the suspect's voice. The neighbors all identify the mysterious man, the voice of Omega 7, as Antonio Casaveris.
These people who knew him as a nice young guy, they were shocked that I'm sitting there playing these credit-taking calls for them, and they're recognizing the voice on the tapes as someone they know.
It's a huge break in the case. The task force immediately gets a subpoena for Casaveris' phone records and begins to analyze who he has been calling.
It's like dropping a pebble in the water. The leads go outward because you see who he calls, and then you see who they called. We start to see heavy calling in times, in dates leading up to incidents, and then on the day of the incident, no calls. And then after the fact, calls.
From the phone records, the FBI identifies 3 other likely members of Omega 7. They analyze the credit card records of all 4 suspects. Among the charges are several automobile rentals.
The car rentals were really one of the biggest things that really became of interest to us.
Agents discover that some of the suspects had rented cars at Newark Airport just before the bombings and could have used them in the crimes. In fact, one man stands out because he had received a parking ticket across the street from the Cuban mission the same day that Omega 7 gunned down the Cuban attaché. His name is Eduardo Mazoras. Miami, September 11th, 1981. The bomb explodes at the Mexican consulate. Omega 7 takes credit. Hours later, a second bomb explodes at the Mexican consulate in Manhattan. Once again, Omega 7 claims credit. Although the explosions are over 1,200 miles apart, Agent Menapace believes it's possible that a single person placed both bombs.
One person had the time to fly from Florida to New Jersey or New York and carry out the bombings.
Agent Menapace rushes to Newark Airport to check the records of rental car agencies.
I just was basically working my way down the line, showing the pictures, asking them questions.
At the very last rental car company, Menapace learns he's on the right track.
The employee looks at the pictures and he said, "You just missed this guy."
Suspect Eduardo Mazoras had just traded in his rental car for a new one. He claimed that the brakes were bad.
I said, "Well, where's that car that he just brought back?" And the guy said, "We haven't touched it yet." I said, "Don't touch it." I said, "He has one of your cars now." The man said, "That's correct."
Agent Menapace knows it's a huge break.
I had the car at the curb that I believe he'd used in the bombings. I had a hard suspect in Omega 7 renting the car just before the bombings in New York and a couple hours after the bombings in Florida.
Agent Menapace asks investigators to meet him at the rental agency.
Rental car place that I responded to.
Time is of the essence. The FBI must stop Omega 7 before the terrorists strike again. Terrorist bombs explode at Mexican consulates in Miami and New York within hours of each other. The FBI believes Omega 7, an elusive group of Cuban radicals, used rental cars to drop off the bombs. Eduardo Mazoras, one of the FBI's prime suspects, has just returned a car at Newark Airport. Special Agent Tom Menapace calls in a canine unit to inspect the vehicle.
watchdog alerts on the trunk. The indication being that there was bomb residue in the explosive residue in the trunk of that car.
Investigators know that Mazoris has rented another car. When he returns it, agents are waiting for him.
How you doing, sir?
Good, Horn.
Mazoris is surrounded by FBI agents, disguised as customers and rental car employees. But with only circumstantial evidence, they decide to surveil him rather than arrest him.
I immediately recognized him. He looked just like his picture.
Agent Menapace follows the suspect on a shuttle bus to the terminal.
I'm just another traveler waiting for a shuttle bus to go to the terminal, and I'm going to stay with him as closely as I can.
I'd like to buy a one-way ticket to Miami.
Menapace watches as Mazoris gets in line to buy a ticket.
And I'm maybe 3 or 4 feet behind him. I'm as close to him without burning the surveillance as I can.
And what's your name?
He uses a false name. He uses the name A. Medina.
M-E-D-I-N-A.
There's your ticket, sir.
And he buys a ticket to Miami.
As the suspect heads for his gate, Agent Menapace rushes to notify the FBI field office in Miami. In Miami, FBI agents follow the suspect from the airport through the narrow streets of Little Havana and eventually to his house. The Miami field office obtains a warrant to wiretap Mazoris' phone. Special Agent George Kaczynski.
We monitor 24 hours a day, and it's very consuming. It takes up a lot of man hours and a lot of personnel, and obviously they had to be bilingual.
For a year, agents listen to the wiretap, but hear nothing that connects Mazoris with Omega-7.
Everything we were doing was basically looking for a thread, looking for that break, looking for that piece of information that was going to get us headed towards, to go from theory to reality, to get to the actors.
In the 6 years since the original Cuban mission bombing, the anti-Castro terrorist organization Omega-7 has spread fear through more than a dozen bombings and 2 assassinations. The FBI is determined to bring the group to justice. On September 2nd, 1982, at the federal courthouse in New York City, prosecutors subpoena all Omega-7 suspects to appear before a federal grand jury. The FBI needs their statement on record before the statute of limitations runs out. But they have an ulterior motive. Knowing that Omega-7 is split into 2 rival factions, the FBI devises a scheme designed to pit one against the other. Agents arrange for the 2 factions to be in court on the same day. They watch as both groups meet in the hallway.
It was evident to me in the courthouse, when we were all there on the same floor, that there was a lot of friction going on between him and them. There was a lot of animosity there.
Agents want each faction to worry that the other faction may be cooperating against them. It could prompt some of them to make a deal.
They certainly knew what they'd done, and they certainly knew who the members of the group were. And the fact that they're all there and we're all there is telling them, you know, without coming right out and saying it, the game's over. We're closing the circle on you guys.
Most of the suspects assert their Fifth Amendment rights and refuse to testify. Only Eduardo Mazoris takes the stand. He denies everything. But 2 weeks after the grand jury confrontation, Agent Wack returns to his office to find a message from Eduardo Mazoris. Agent Wack returns the call immediately.
He basically said, I want to come up to talk to you. Well, obviously, I'm not about to turn down that offer. So I said, well, when would you like this to be? And he said, well, I'm going to arrive within the next couple of days, and I'll reach out for you then, and we'll arrange to meet.
Fine, I'll be waiting for your call.
Days later, Agent Wack and an NYPD detective meet Eduardo Mazoras at a hotel in Newark.
Heard you got some information for me.
He was very well-groomed, and you think you were sitting there talking to, a New York City businessman about a deal coming up. That was not really a big deal, at least in his eyes.
Eduardo Mazoras tells them that he's come to negotiate with the FBI on behalf of Omega-7's leader, Omar.
Omar's a little concerned that the FBI is getting close. Not just New York, but Miami, Newark, and everybody else that's participating in this thing.
Mazoras says he's willing to tell them all about the crimes committed by the other faction, but only if the FBI promises to leave Omar's faction alone. Agent Wack asks to meet Omar in person. Mazoras tells him it's impossible, but he agrees to meet again the next day. Agents suspect that Omar does not exist. Agent Wack fears that he could be Omega-7's next target.
The first thing we did was look under the car we were driving, because at that juncture, I had no idea what this guy was up to. Possibly this was some sort of a setup. So we checked the car for a bomb pretty close when we left.
The next day, investigators meet with Eduardo Mazoras for a second time. They confront the suspect about Omar's existence.
You're Omar, and you are here to negotiate this whole thing. And he said, yes, you're right.
You're Omar. I have been someone in charge.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you.
Investigators read him his Miranda rights.
You have the right to talk to an attorney and have him present with you.
Mazoras talks about the criminal activities of his rival faction.
He started identifying the names of the people who put the bombs down. He initially had problems remembering who did what, because they had done so much.
The other group?
Mazoras reveals that the rival faction has more than 1/4 ton of explosives hidden away for future attacks. He tells investigators he's willing to return to Miami to help them find the explosives.
Let's say for a favor.
He wanted to put the opposing faction permanently out of business, and was hoping that in his own mysterious way that he could work a relationship with the FBI and the government that I'll help you get rid of them, I won't do this no more, and leave me alone.
Where's it stored?
But in damning his former comrades, Mazoras reveals that he is Omega-7's primary bomb maker.
He is the one who was going to call the shots as to who dies, who gets bombed, how they carry it out. I remember thinking to myself that you're so deep. I don't even know if a deal's going to be possible with anything here.
The FBI now faces a major dilemma. Mazoras is a confessed terrorist. They can either arrest him, or they can take him back to Miami to find the explosives. The decision rises through the ranks of the FBI and the Department of Justice.
It went all the way to the director of the FBI, whether we were going to make this trip to Miami.
The director of the FBI declares that saving lives is paramount. They should send Eduardo Mazoras back to Miami.
We were duty-bound to attempt to find those 600 to 800 pounds of high explosives. Those explosives could have killed a number of innocent people. We had to take a chance. We had to locate those explosives.
Mazoris flies back to Miami. His FBI handlers travel on a separate flight, fearing their presence could jeopardize Mazoris's cover. Mazoris returns to Little Havana with instructions to check in by phone. For 4 days, the informant contacts the FBI to brief agents on his hunt for the explosives. Then, on the 5th day, Mazoris sounds odd.
And he started wavering about whether he could go on with this whole cooperative thing. I didn't like the tone I heard. I had a bad feeling about the call.
Agent Wack encourages Mazoris to keep trying and to call him back that afternoon.
What's going on?
He begins to wonder if the explosives even exist, or whether the informant is just manipulating the FBI. The FBI NYPD task force is in a difficult situation. They have released an informant, confessed terrorist Eduardo Mazoris, who claims he can lead them to a quarter-ton of explosives. But now agents begin to doubt his intentions. The informant is acting strangely. Special Agent Larry Wack anxiously waits for the informant to call.
Hello? He said, I'm sorry, but I'm not coming back. He said, I gotta go, and there was a click on the other end of the phone.
For the task force, it's a worst-case scenario. Special Agent George Kaczynski of the Miami field office now has a terrorist loose in his city.
We were devastated, and then we had to regroup and say, okay, now we have to find him.
Armed with federal warrants, the FBI finds and arrests Mazoris's colleagues.
Up against the wall, hands on your head, right hand down.
They include Antonio Casavetes, suspected of bombing the Cuban mission in New York City.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you.
FBI agents search for Mazoris in Cuban communities in Miami and throughout the United States. FBI Special Agent Tom Walzer.
He was out there as a fugitive on limb. He had been identified, but he was still in charge of the group.
2 weeks later, Special Agent Larry Wack receives an unexpected call.
FBI.
It's Mazoris.
And I was shocked. I was absolutely caught off guard with this phone call. And basically, he starts apologizing for taking off. And I think he felt truly bad that he ran out on us. And when he said he was sorry, I really believe he was.
All right.
But he was also calling because he was trying to find out, what are you guys going to do with these other guys who did the murders and so on and so forth? And where is that going to leave me?
Meet you.
Agent Wack devises a plan to trap the fugitive.
Call me at home.
He tells Mazoris to call him at home.
I gave my home phone number with instructions that if he had to call again, call collect.
Call me later at my home.
I didn't want to have him in a phone booth calling and all of a sudden run out of quarters and have to hang up.
All right.
Investigators set up a trap and trace on all calls to Agent Wack's home. At the very least, they will find out whether or not Mazoris is still in Miami. Days turn into weeks. There is no word from the fugitive. Then, a month and a half later, Agent Wack receives a call. It's him.
I had to have my wife find a neighbor who was awake at 2 in the morning, use their telephone to call the New York FBI office to make notifications down to Miami and to Miami Telephone Company.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Agent Wack tries to keep Mazoris on the phone long enough to trace the call.
Okay.
Miami FBI agents speed to Little Havana. The call is coming from a payphone.
You're talking about having 3-4 minutes max, so our chances of getting in there on time are very, very difficult.
When agents arrive, the fugitive is gone.
Hello?
Over the next 8 months, Eduardo Mazoris calls Agent Wack at home more than a dozen times.
No, go ahead.
Agents continue their attempts to trap him.
On one occasion, we missed him by a matter of minutes, where the phone was just dangling off the receiver, hanging down off in the phone booth.
Agents are frustrated but remain persistent. They map the location of each payphone Mazoris uses. A pattern emerges. Every call has come from Little Havana.
We felt very confident that he was living or working in that area.
You want to concentrate in this area now?
Investigators decide not to show the fugitive's photo around Little Havana.
Great.
They fear he will flee to a different city or a different country.
The last thing we wanted anybody to do was get word to him that we were zeroing in on an area. That's the last thing we wanted to happen, because we didn't want him to leave. If he left, we were in big trouble.
Agents do reach out to their most trusted informants in the area, but nobody has seen Eduardo Mazoris. They suspect the terrorist has gone into hiding. Then, on January 12, 1983, bombs explode at 2 Cuban businesses in Miami. A third bomb is found unexploded. Omar, aka Eduardo Mazoris, takes credit for the attacks.
It was bad enough he's on the run. Now he's bombing again. And our first reaction was, my God, if this guy kills anybody, we'll never live with ourselves.
Larry Wack.
The next night, Agent Wack receives a call. It's Mazoris.
The first thing out of my mouth was, did you do that thing last night? And he said, yeah. Yeah, you know, I just wanted to let you guys know I was still around and let the other side know I was still around and keep the enemy at bay, the enemy being Castro.
Wack tries to keep Mazoris on the phone as long as possible. He's worried by what he hears.
I could tell he got a lot of enjoyment out of doing it. And that made me very nervous, because he was going to get more enjoyment as the days went on if he didn't get caught.
The FBI needs a better plan to trap Mazoris before more innocent people are killed. In Miami, an elusive bomber, Eduardo Mazoris, is on the run. After making a series of traced phone calls, the terrorist eludes the FBI's attempts to catch him. Agents must find a way to speed up their response time. In New York City, on July 20th, 1983, they get that chance. FBI Special Agent Larry Wack gets a call in the early morning hours.
Larry Wack.
It's Mazoris.
Eddie.
Agent Wack's wife notifies the FBI to set the trace in motion. FBI agents in Miami speed toward Little Havana, waiting for word on the caller's exact location.
Well, I think if you're still willing, there's probably a way.
Agent Wack tries to keep the fugitive on the phone as long as possible.
I kept wondering, where is everybody? Where is everybody? Why haven't they gotten him yet? I'm almost running out of things to talk about.
Right. All right.
Mazoris hangs up.
Bye.
The FBI has lost him. Moments later, an agent arrives at the payphone. Mazoris is gone. the agent notices a man resembling Mazoras enter an apartment a block away. FBI Special Agent Tom Walzer.
We were very excited but guarded. And based on the location where he saw this individual go into, we had our hopes up.
The FBI watches the apartment all night, but no one comes out. The next day, agents knock on the landlady's door. They show her a photo of the fugitive and ask if he lives there.
She looked at the photo and said, yes, that's it.
Right over at that house right there. I see. Would you have a few minutes?
Rather than provoke a violent confrontation, the agents asked the landlady to call her tenant outside.
She knocked on the door and asked for him to come to the door in Spanish.
FBI, outside! Outside! Get out!
He was in complete shock when he saw us, a group of agents armed. He was very surprised, and he was placed under arrest.
I'm in the kitchen, guys.
Inside the apartment, agents find the tools of the terrorists' deadly trade.
He had numerous weapons, silencers, Omega-7 stickers, vests, other paramilitary paraphernalia, bomb components.
Agents also find remote control devices and half-built timers for setting off bombs.
I think that he was preparing to conduct terrorist activities because those timers were at different stages. We felt very gratified that we were able to stop it before anybody got hurt.
The federal jury convicts Eduardo Mazoras of bombings, conspiracy, and the murder of the Cuban mission attaché. He is sentenced to life in prison. Other members of Omega-7, already incarcerated, plead guilty to conspiracy to murder a foreign official and conspiracy to bomb property of a foreign government. They are sentenced to 10 years in prison.
And I think it sent a message to the exile community that, look, we understand you're anti-Castro and you hate communism as much as most of us, but I got bad news for you, pal. You're not going to bring your methods to our streets.
The successful conclusion of the Omega-7 case in the summer of 1983 does send a message. It brings an end to anti-Castro terrorism within the United States.